Hey, everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you today. Very excited. We got Nick returning for the third time now. Fourth? Third time? Okay, cool. Awesome. And we got Steve joining us again. You're on four or five now,
I
I
think we're on
think.
number five. I think it's
Five?
number five
Nice. We
today.
got some returning guests. I like it. Now, for all of those who haven't done this yet, by all means, make sure you're doing this. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails when we drop these on Fridays. It is going to be a good one. So let's get into some intros. I know you guys have been here before, but let's hit it up. I'm going to go Nick, 10, 15 seconds. Who are you, where you come from, all that good stuff. Give her.
Howdy. U.S. Army Ranger veteran. Did about 10 years in the United States Army. Currently a junior at Harvard studying neuroscience, looking to help with non-standard forms of therapy.
Bam. I like it. Steve, how about yourself?
Steve Wilson, high school teacher, mountain bike coach, general outdoor dude, and avid new hunter, and just a guy trying to make it work for kids. And it's been we've had our hands full the last few weeks for sure.
No doubt. All right. Sean, how's it going out in the mountains?
Going well. Had a great ride yesterday, way better than the ride the day before. And I'm still bouncing off some rocks and trees out there. The traction is less than ideal. So I've actually got a big red hickey on my shoulder from bouncing off taking a corner too tight yesterday, bounced off a tree. But loving it, man. Just, on the edge, pushing the envelope, living large, all that good stuff.
As per normal for Sean. I like it. So I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation, but first off, I do want to talk to Nick. You just got back from a major trip, right? You were down in South America, climbing some mountains, having some blasty blasts. I saw all the posts on Instagram. Looked like a ton of fun. Why don't you give us a little rundown of that?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to partner with Veterans Adventure Group. They're a US based veteran organization nonprofit with the goal of getting veterans into groups, getting them outside, and doing different excursions. I happen to be part of the mountaineering team, but we have a diving team and a skydiving team as well. So if American vets or any other vets in America are interested, just reach out to Veterans Adventure Group on Instagram and stuff like that. But yeah, so I'm part of their expedition team, and I'm personally trying to climb the seven summits. The goal is to be the first actively enrolled Harvard student in the history of the college to climb all seven summits while being actively enrolled. And the goal of that was or is to bring awareness to mental health and the power of getting outside in groups, as well as to encourage veterans to pursue education after the military service. So by partnering with Veterans Venture Group, they've been kind of helping me get along with that. And I just finished my fourth mountain, Aconcagua, down in South America, down there in Argentina, and it was a great time climbing with those guys and getting to do everything with them.
Yeah, it looked like a ton of fun. Sean, you got any questions for him right off the hop?
It's funny that you should mention that, Nick, because, well, a couple of things came to mind. One is you're trying to do the seven summits, and that's mega rad, of course. But right here in our town of Roseland, British Columbia, just up the road here, we have a mountain bike trail, and it's an IMBA Epic, so International Mountain Biking Association Epic. There's not that many epics in the world. And the reason it's called an epic is because it's freaking epic, man. There are certain standards or certain requirements that a trail has to meet in order to be designated an epic, meaning that they're quite rare out there. But we have one right in our freaking backyard, and it's called the Seven Summits Trail. And now people fly from across Canada or around the world to come and shred on this trail because it's magnificent. It's got all of the things that any rider would ever want to ride on in order to have like a hell of a day that leaves a mark in your mind, a day that you'll never forget for either the vistas or for the workload that you've got to put out to earn it, the problems that you're going to run into out there, because you will. It's called an epic for a reason because it's so freaking epic. It's going to leave a mark in your mind. And so, thinking of the Seven Summits Trail just in my backyard, and then thinking of what you just came back from, I'm reminded of a moment that I was in an airport. I was flying down to Peru when I was flying out of Italy. It's actually where I met my wife. Was in the international airport in Peru. She was flying from Canada. I was flying from Italy. We bumped into each other. presto changeo, we now have kids. And so as I was flying down there, I was in the airport, and sitting next to me was a dude with all the gear on. He even had his big old plastic climbing boots. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, bro, what's going on there?" And he said, "Oh, I'm about to climb a mountain." And he started rattling off the mountains that he's done, the mountain that he was about to hit. And I said, "So what's with the boots? Like, can you not pack them?" And he said, "They're just way too much. They're too bulky. I don't want to pay for them to ship them, and so I'm just going to wear them on the plane." I said, "That's a good idea, I suppose." And he said, "Have you ever done anything like this?" And I said, "What, like climbing mountains?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, I've climbed some things, but I'm not a climber. I don't categorize myself as a climber." And he said, "Well, you look like a guy who would really enjoy it." And I said, "Enjoy what?" And he said, "The hardship of it. You look like a guy who would enjoy the challenge." And I said, "I do like a good challenge." And he said, "Have you ever thought about doing an epic mountain like this?" And I said, "Not really." And then he looked me square in the eye. And this was a dude I'd never met. He was there with his girlfriend. They were flying out of Germany to go and hit this mountain. He looks me square in the eye and says, "Hey, would you like to join us? Would you like to climb the mountain with us right now?" I said, "Dude, I've got plans. I've got some work I need to do in Peru." And he said, "Yeah, but would you like to join us?" And at that time in my life, I was focused on kicking ass in a whole pile of different ways. I wasn't focused on kicking ass in my, what I thought at the time, my off time, my fun time, my clown around time, my I've got a bit of spare time, I'm going to go do something fun time. That's how I used to think back then. But it's those little moments where that guy looked me in the eye and I categorized it as, that's frivolous. I just didn't understand. Now I understand. My response to that dude should have been, "Say what? Where are we going? Where do we go next? Let's freaking go, bro." I didn't even know his name, but that should have been my response back then. And so it's taken me a number of years to delineate between my work time and my off time. But now I find that as I've delineated, my work time and my off time can move back and forth. And they're actually flexible titles that my work time can be my fun time and my fun time can be my work time. And it's only through, I guess that is now about 23 years ago, when I was sitting in that airport, it's only since a couple of decades that I've learned to establish, when someone looks me in the eye and says, "Hey, you want to go climb 7 summits with me?" It's in that moment now that I can look that person in the eye and have the liberty, have the flexibility, have the wherewithal to understand a fuller sense of how to live a good life, and then make a better informed decision as to, yeah, I will join you, or I'd love to, I really would, but I've got a few things to do in Peru. And so I think it takes time, a lot of years of time, to understand how to be flexible in your life or with your time, to better understand what is really important in life. And it ain't the job, and it ain't the homework, because all of those things will eventually get done. It's the things that slip away, like the invite in an airport. "Hey, you want to climb this mountain with us?" Bro, I don't even know you. But those are the opportunities that leave a mark in our minds, as far as I'm concerned. I never climbed anything with that dude. We talked for half an hour and then we went our separate ways. But I've never forgot that moment. I categorize it as one of the, not standout moments, but one of the markers in my life as to, I kind of botched that. I could have made it work, but somehow it felt like I had to work to make it work. I've had to learn over the years how to not make that moment work. Does that make sense?
I think I'm tracking. It's
Yeah,
Nick, you got a thought on this?
yeah. I like what you said about the hardship stuff, man. Like, you look like a guy who enjoys hardships. I think that's like something to be proud of. But what I got at, like when I reflected on when I thought of that, was the team of people that I climbed with. You know, we're all veterans and stuff like that. But dude, we look like a band of misfits. Just like I call it, we look like a bunch of street kids. You know what I mean? Like my tent mate's a 56-year-old social worker. One of the other guys is like this ranger. He got shot in the face, shot in the stomach. So now he's like 6'4", 170 pounds, super skinny, like mountain Jesus looking guy. His girlfriend. We have a dude who's actually an old Pathfinder. And then we have this little Filipino girl named April who was a 1/6 officer. She's like 5'5", 40 pounds. You're just like a tiny thing, you know, and we all just look like different. We all look like none of us kind of blend in or whatever, hang out. But it's the idea of like someone who enjoys the hardship and like the struggle and the growth that comes through pursuing hardship. Uh, I really, it's one, I guess I'm kind of caught on the idea of like, that would be something I'd be proud of if someone said about me, but also the idea that I think it's really cool and interesting that sometimes you can just like pick that up on a person, that they just exude like they'd pursue hardship, and like how our entire team was able to come together. And we, you know, half the team I climbed Denali with, and all the new ones I climbed Aconcagua with. But the big uniting factor was that we enjoy hardship and we enjoy the growth that comes from hardship. And that's something that I really hold special with this group of people and other people like that.
I love that. Steve, you've been quiet in the corner there. You got any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, Sean, first of all, I met my wife in an airport too on a trip. And so one of those things where I was on the road and on a boys trip. And you know, when you see somebody and you look at them and you're like, our paths are supposed to cross. And I saw her on the way, believe it or not, we were on the same flight on the way down and didn't see her on the entire trip. And then all of a sudden she's sitting at the exact same terminal, like waiting to fly home. And I was like, okay, 2 times in a row, this is happening. And so I found an entry point, access point. We started up a conversation. I didn't even know she was Canadian. And get on the plane, and she's in the fourth row on the window. And I remember she smiled at me. She just looked at me and smiled at me. And I was like, oh, I don't even know how I'm going to do this, but it's on. And I got the last seat in the last row by the crapper, row 24. It was a smaller plane. And I remember I just paged the stewardess, and we hadn't even left the gate yet. I paged the stewardess. She shows up, and I was like, I need a napkin and a pen. And I wrote a message to her and said, hey, like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what your story is, but I know our paths are supposed to cross. And I said, take it to the girl in the fourth row on the window in the white jacket. And she goes, are you serious? And I was like, yeah, I need this. Can you do this for me? And off she went. We get airborne and we're in the flight probably 40 minutes and like nothing's happened. I was like, oh, well, whatever, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? So all of a sudden she comes back and she's like, in all my years, I've never seen anything like this happen. And it was a napkin back from my wife, who's now my wife, and we have 2 kids together. Her name's Stacy. And she's like, yeah, she's like, I'm Canadian. I live in Vancouver. I'd love to go out, because I'd asked her a very specific thing. I was like, I'd love to take you for a blueberry green tea frappuccino when we get home if you're Canadian. And so she accepted on the napkin. And then, because you never know if people are going to have bags, right? When you get where you're going, she could have just been carry on and I never would have seen her again. And 2 days later, and we went on our first date, and here we are all these years later. So I appreciate that for sure. And I love the idea of Mountain Jesus, because I feel like all of us who have been around or taken the chance to go on adventures have encountered our Mountain Jesus. Like, I can tell you for sure, I met one in Switzerland. I met one in Alaska when I was up there, and they're just these wily people that come out of the woodwork, and you're like, you're grateful to see them, right? But it's because they're all, and I think what I'm hearing is just like-mindedness brings a sense of camaraderie and a sense of companionship regardless of relationship. You know, like Sean, I got a phone call from a good friend one time. He's like, do you want to go to Switzerland this weekend to go on a mountain bike trip? And I was like, yep, I'm in. And I just put it on my credit card. And next thing you know, I'm trying to figure out a bike box to get my bike packed up. And we went to Switzerland for 10 days and had one of the better trips I've had in my life. Broke as hell when I came home. Like, I literally put a European mountain bike trip on a credit card. Who does that? I was also fiscally irresponsible back in the day, but we're squared away now. But I wouldn't trade that debt for anything, because the trip that we went on and the time that we had and the friends that I still have from that trip, and that was in 2001. I was just finishing school. I still have those friends from that trip, and we've been together and ridden together in different places since then. And so, yeah, I love what I'm hearing, because it's kind of how I ground my life, is in these opportunities and these random people that you get to meet, right? It's like, Travis has been on the podcast. I met Travis on one of the mental health walks. I'd seen him on social media, had listened to a couple podcasts, but when I shook his hand and looked him eye to eye, I was like, oh, this homie and I are going to be friends. Like, you just kind of know, right? And we don't know each other super well yet, but it's like you just vibe. You can share a vibe with somebody who's been and done things that you feel passionate about. And I think that's what I've been seeing so much of, fellas, in the last 3 weeks. We're in a new semester with a bunch of new kids. Is that every time you start something fresh with a new batch of people, you're all of a sudden it stirs my passions back up because I see what their potentials are and I see what they could bring into their life if they choose it. And it just feels like a chance to kind of light the fire under some other people. So I hope whoever's listening today is going to vibe with this at least a little bit or enough to like meet somebody in an airport and vibe with them and be like, you know what, let's exchange numbers. Who knows? And now with social media, it's so much easier, right? Like you could grab a handle off somebody and all of a sudden you start following their social for a bit. And next time you're traveling towards where they are, it's like, hey, yeah, remember me? Like shoot them a DM and be like, why don't we grab a coffee or something and you can give me the lay of the land. First time I went to Hawaii, I didn't know anything about Hawaii, but I'd coached a couple dudes from Hawaii and I reached out to them and they're like, yeah, go here, don't go there. Best donuts are here, good coffee there. And it's like all of a sudden we're networking, whether we have like serendipitous networking or strategic networking. Like I feel like that's what I feel the potentials are here for sure.
Yeah. I really like this. This is Nick, you got something? What do you got?
Yeah, so like the idea of just obviously not just to like meet a girl or something, but which is super rad. Don't be wrong, shoot your shot, fellas. But the idea of just meeting people organically and doing something like that just reminds me of this friend group, like my core friend group from the army. We call ourselves the Shreddy Boys because we're a bunch of idiots, and we all like skate, surf, and snowboard together and stuff like that, right? The Shreddy Boy crew. But one day, me and one of the Shreddy Boys were out and we're surfing down in Oregon, and I forget the name of the spot we're at. We're overlooking a cliff, and we parked next to this white Sprinter van. My buddy Jared went down, surfed, did our thing, and coming back up, we saw this dude and his girl and his dog hanging outside the van. At the time, as any kind of dirtbag kid in the Pacific Northwest does, I was looking to convert a van. So I was doing all kinds of research, saw this dude's van, super sick. Hit him up, was like, hey man, not to be weird, but I'm looking at doing vans. Do you mind if I like poke around your van a little bit? And he's like, absolutely, dude. His girlfriend was like, dang it, not again. And then so him and I are in there, we're like tracing power, we're going through all the minor details that nobody cares about. And we ended up just being a really cool dude. His girlfriend was awesome, dog was cool. We ended up grabbing dinner that night. Then they were also camping there, so we ended up surfing the whole next day together. And that was almost 5 years ago. And now he's like one of our best friends in the. He's like officially, he's the only non-veteran, non-ranger in our Shirty Boy group. And he's just an awesome guy. And he's been one of those like an asset as a friend for the last 5 years, simply because you go out of your way to see, like, talk to a dude and just kind of follow that vibe, that good energy. And like he's been to every one of our weddings so far, like but he's like in there, man. And
he's a Shreddy Boy, man.
Shreddy Boy, yeah. It's just awesome to see what can happen from one or two good interactions and just kind of reaching the hand out there and like talking to someone.
The only reason that you could do that, the only reason that he's in that game with you guys right now is because you're not a one-dimensional dude. So, you knew a few things about vans, and much like yourself, I had considered for the last several years of buying a van and building one out. Not perhaps all by myself, but having someone do it and live in that lifestyle. And so you know how it goes. Before you put your first screw in metal in your van, you've got to spend 1 gajillion hours of research. And so I knew all of the solar. I knew all of the lithium batteries. I knew all of the power systems. I knew all of the things. I knew a ton of stuff when I was researching vans. And that knowledge or that research has allowed me to have conversations with all kinds of people in parking lots, in a grocery store lineup, whatever, all over the place with all kinds of people just on vans. I've done exactly what you just described, where the girlfriend has said, "Oh no, okay, I'm gonna go shopping," and that leaves me and the other dude that I don't barely know to talk about lithium batteries. And so I think that that's an important aspect of how you run your life and how you interact with people. Is the more you know, the easier it is to interact. And not just the more you know on a single subject, but the more silos you know things about. And to a depth within that silo allows you to move around the world and freely converse with literally anyone. The more you know, the easier it is to talk. My wife came up to me in the airport as I was bending over to grab my rucksack of my gear, and she saw on the back of my pants Mountain Equipment Co-op. So she knew I was Canadian. There was no napkin swapped. There was just my wife staring at my arse and seeing the napkin on the back of my pants. And that's how we ended up hooking up. Just a random moment where she took the chance to come on over and say, "Hey, are you Canadian?" That's how conversations start. That's how lifetimes gel. And so, to your point, Nick, today or this evening at 1800 hours, I'm meeting a guy here in our town at a place called the Flying Steam Shovel, a restaurant, a pub. I've never met him before. I don't know if he's 6 foot tall or 4 feet tall. But I do know that a couple of days ago, he reached out to me on my Instagram and said, "Hey, bro, I didn't know you lived in Rossland. That's amazing. We're going up there this weekend to ski. Do you mind if we get together for coffee or dinner or anything like that?" And I said, "Sure." So we're meeting together tonight, him and his girlfriend. And again, I don't really know what the dude looks like. I don't know how long he's been following me. Even if he is a mass murderer, I feel pretty confident. I don't think I'm going to be one of the people to die. So, what does that even mean? What I just said? It means that the way I've lived my life allows people to connect with me. And I know we're going to be able to talk about anything because I've talked about a lot of things. And so, as we're sitting down there, I'm confident enough in how I've lived my life that I can walk into that place and I have zero concern about that dude and how weird he is or not weird he is. It just doesn't bother me at all because I've faced weird and I've faced not weird. And so I'm comfortable in that space where it's a brand spanking new person in front of me that I know nothing about. And we're going to hang out for a couple of hours tonight. And I love it because I'm going to learn things from that dude. I'm going to learn how he bumped into me. I'm going to learn how he's interested in me. I'm going to learn how I can do it better. And then I'm going to figure out who he is and I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And over the course of the evening, I'll be richer for it. It'll be another tiny little mark in my mind that I'll be able to look back on 10 years from now and think, yeah, okay, I see how it all shaped up. I see how I ended up at 70 knowing all of these people on social media. So at 60, you can kind of read the future if you just stick to the process, stick to your game plan, stick to what you know works over the decades. You can almost predict the future in a way. What do you guys think?
That's an interesting thought. Steve, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that what I'm hearing there though is that even, when you knew what you knew at 60, it's kind of like and I'm not 60, but I'm getting on in years to the point where I think I've realized how much more open I need to be later in life because I could at one point there was definitely a point in time where I could feel that I was pulling back from engagement. You kind of feel like, hey, you're getting older, or like, hey, you're losing your thumb's coming off the pulse of certain things. And I remember making a conscious choice that I was going to re-engage. Like people get old, people age out of things because they choose to. It's not because they want to. Like I went to a really rad punk show not too long ago. As a 45-year-old, my brother and I used to go to punk shows all the time. And I remember just at one point, you start wearing earplugs and you're like, I don't really want to be in the pit anymore. And I'm not really great with crowds anymore. And so what happens is you just end up pulling back and closing doors to opportunity as opposed to like choosing a mindset of like, I'm going to keep myself open-minded. I'm going to keep my heart open to new opportunities and new things. And I'm just going to have the bravery to say yes. And I think that that's what I'm noticing so much more of. A little bit about I've had some very hard conversations with adults in the last month that have been like uniquely challenging. And I've just found myself choosing to lean into care, not to take this too serious a direction, but like I've really had to consciously choose to lean into care for the people that were essentially verbally like trying to get at me or trying to take a run at me because of what I am and who I stand for or what I stand for and whatnot. And I remember like way back then choosing not to get old, like a conscious choice. I'm going to engage with the things that I still love and there's no reason not to engage with them. But then that's kind of kept my heart and my mind open to like, now here I am in present day having conversations with people that are super hard, but choosing to embrace care because I don't want them to shut off, if that makes any sense. Like to me, the confrontations that are coming from them are them choosing to close themselves off to the things they love, the things that make them uncomfortable, the things that scare them potentially a little bit. And I feel like now I'm in a position where I can help guide people towards staying open, but it's very much like a conscious choice because I can see that their behavior is not coming from them. It's coming from the struggle. It's coming from the hardship that they're not ready to embrace or don't have the tools to embrace. And so I think that by choosing to stay engaged and Sean, like you say, you're hopeful to know more at 70 than you did at 60, if I'm inferring that correctly. It's like I think that's a magic thing because if we can get at least our circle around us to align with that type of thinking, then that circle is just going to continue to expand in concentric rings because more and more people are just choosing to stay open. Like go to that punk show if you feel like the weird old dude. Who cares? Go and have like enjoy the spirit of it. And guess what you're gonna find there? You're gonna find other weird old timers there too, right? Like going to the skate park now and skating. It's like, yeah, I can still roll around and I can get that done. Am I trying to ollie the six there? No, I'm not, because I'm gonna get jacked up and break something again. You know what I mean? But I'm not gonna stop rolling. Or it's just yeah, that really resonated with me, Sean. So I appreciate that thought.
Absolutely. Nick, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm just laughing about the skate park thing. Like I grew up skating and stuff, and behind the track here, there's a pump track. For people who don't know, a pump track is just kind of like a circular thing with a bunch of bumps, and you can ride a skateboard or bike around. When my buddy hit me up, he's like, "Dude, you got your board? You want to go skate?" I was like, "Absolutely, dude. Let's go!" Like I used to tear these up. As soon as I drop in, I ate it. Like just out the gate, dude. Just whap. I was like, "Oh, what hurts more than falling at 16 is falling at 31. It's even better." Um, I was like, "I'm good. Just like give me like 10 minutes. I have to sit there and lick my wounds." But yeah, to what you guys are saying, man, like staying open, I think it's incredibly important. The way I always say it is like I'm a collector of weirdos. A normal person's never changed the world. It's the weirdo who goes out there and is like, I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna march my own beat. I'm gonna do what I feel I need to do, and they go do it and chase that down, and they're the ones who end up making these big impacts, right? But it's kind of along the same idea that we've been talking about is like I think there's an incredible power behind pursuing hobbies and things that you love. And granted, I'm only 31, so I think I'm the youngest. Only by a couple years in this group. Not too much, guys. But even at my age and my demographic, it's starting to see the forks in the road really start to develop. Right, guys are picking up families. Their bodies are starting to get weird and old, and the creeks are starting to set in. And I notice a lot of friends aren't pursuing their hobbies, aren't chasing the things that they love. And I think through chasing those things that you love and that still spark that joy in your heart, that like deep down stuff. Like next week, I'm going heli skiing with some buddies actually up in British Columbia there. So I might be in your guys' neighborhood. But I've been fortunate and grateful enough to be snowboarding since I was like 12 years old. And these are things that still light my heart on fire. And through that and staying open through these challenges, you get to meet awesome people and you bring these communities around. And I think I noticed it, like Sean, you still get out there and get after it, man. You do things that light your heart on fire. And through that, there's this energy that you emit, and you can see people who don't do those things, and you can see their energy's different. And like I think there's just this incredible power to kind of what everybody's been saying about staying open to your hobbies, and staying open to things that you love that bring you that joy, even if you're not good at them. Like I'm terrible at fly fishing, and I still get out there and get after it and just lose $50 of flies every time I go out, right? But it's fun, and it brings me joy, and through that I'm able to like be in a better place, and through being in that better place as a chain reaction, have these conversations, talk to dudes about their spinner bands, and learn more about everything, and have these interesting conversations. So you can bounce around the world, and anywhere you go, you have something to talk about with anyone you meet. I was in an airport at like 3 a.m. in Marrakesh, and I was talking to this French football player who was coming to play on the team in Morocco, and him and I were the only two dudes in the airport, and what we bonded over was hip hop and reggae. Like I don't know anything about French hip hop or much about Morocco because I was a surf bum then. And he didn't know much about anything that I was doing at the time in America, but we were able to bond over hip hop, just like classic hip hop and reggae. And we talked about that for like 2.5, 3 hours, and I think it's just these beautiful moments through pursuing things that you enjoy. It allows you to meet people and have these super interesting, beautiful conversations anywhere you go.
Yeah. I could not agree more with you guys. I wrote down a little bit earlier, the ties that bind. And I think this is kind of what we're talking about in the fact that, those hobbies, those things that light your heart on fire, all the things that we do that we really enjoy are all little ties that bind us to certain things. So I was thinking about this, that I'm a bit of a cowboy. So when I'm on horseback, and I'm getting my saddle all sorted and getting all my gear all ready. There's a whole bunch of different little clips and ties and straps and all kinds of stuff to get the saddle correctly put on the horse. And the trick is that all those things are usually separate, right? When you buy your saddle, it's just a saddle. You don't have any of those ties, so you have to go and get a tie, and then you have to go get a girth strap, and you have to go and get all the other things, right? So a lot of times saddles can look very haphazard, in that there's lots of different pieces from different things that are being put on together and become almost a jumble. But when it's done and it's put on the horse, it works properly, and it looks like it works properly. And I think that's similar to what we're talking to here, in the fact that the collective is a great example. We have ties that bind us through. We all want to have these conversations. We all want to talk about these things. But then on top of that, we all have different ties within that. Nick and Sean and I are all veterans. That's a tie that binds us. Mountain bikers, that's a tie that binds us. Adventurers, that's a tie that binds us. All these different little things are ways in which we can tie to each other to allow us to move forward, or to build that saddle to carry other people into these realms, which I think is great. And I wanted to ask you guys what your guys' thoughts are on building those ties with people who have never done it. So taking someone hunting, taking someone mountain biking, taking someone surfing, right, who've never experienced that, and bringing in that first little tie that you can attach somebody to it, and then allow them to start building their own set around that piece of information. Steve, what are you thinking?
Man, it's I've said this 1,000 times, I think, in my life. A spark starts a fire. And so I think for me, it's like, give somebody like an easy, and by easy I don't mean like watered down, but give them an experience that they can be successful at. Mountain biking is a great example, because like we have people that fly to Whistler, man, from like literally around the world, and they think they're going to get off the plane, they're going to drive up the Sea to Sky, rent a bike, and they think they're going to go ride A-Line, which is like the most popular trail hands down in the bike park. A-Line's a monster, and that thing will jack you up, legitimately jack you up, if you don't know what you're doing, and if you don't have a safe access point. So I think starting somebody literally like with the safest possible access point that they can have success at is what lights that spark, right? And then that spark just slowly smolders. And hunting's a great example for me, man. I hunted for 4 years without having any success. Like, granted, it was a limited time frame in the season, but I had somebody who I trusted very much as a mentor, who was like, no, like, here's what did we have success at. I didn't come home with a critter, but I did have success at learning how to put a pack together. I did have success at learning how to shoot my firearm at different distance and learn my BDC, so that I knew exactly what I was doing to become more proficient for when the opportunity came. I passed on animals because it was the right decision to make ethically for conservation. And so, like, even though I didn't have success, there were all these little micro successes that were building up my toolkit, so that it kept me engaged. And I think that's really the crux, whether, working with kids that are all levels of health and wellness. Like for fitness, I've got a kid, a grade 11 boy currently, who is terribly unwell. And he signed up for strength and conditioning thinking he's going to light the world on fire. Well, we know how that goes, right? It's like, look at New Year's resolutions in fitness clubs. They make their membership dues in that 1 month of January, because everybody's going to get on the Get Right program, right? And it's like, no, 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 no. This is not how we're doing this. With this kid, he comes in and I give him 10 minutes worth of work, and then he foam rolls and he stretches to increase his mobility. And he's like, Wilson, he's like, look at what all the other kids are doing. And I'm like, no, 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 forget that. They've already done their 10 minutes, and then their 20 minutes, and then their 30 minutes to get where they are. You're just starting here. And if you have enough faith in me and enough trust in me to trust the programming for a month, I will get you feeling better. And then guess what? That's going to turn into 30 minutes and 40 minutes. And then you're going to be up with everybody else. Like, our number one, I have a big sign on my gym in the school that just says, no one cares how much you lift. That's the main rule in our gym, is no one cares how much you lift. And we have a community and a culture that I fight tirelessly to build, is that if somebody has more ability than somebody else, they become a partner to the person with less ability. There's no judgment, there's no hard time. It's like, how can I help that person get a little bit better? Now, is it perfect? Does it work every day? No, I got to bust chops on the regular because the peacocks got to be the peacocks. And here's what I'm learning is that the people who have that peacocky chip on their shoulder, they're in the exact same place as the person starting at 10 minutes. They just project it differently. They're just showing their insecurities in a different manner. Right. And we all do. I'm sorry, I don't want to speak for all of us, but like, I definitely do that for sure. Like, if I feel like I have strength in one area, I work really hard to make sure I don't use that against anybody or anything. But yeah, like sometimes if I'm in the ditch, I can get a little bit judgy about things. But luckily I have a bit of a recognition system I built within myself to be like, take a mindful breath and just be like, hey, am I being a judgy a-hole right now? Or am I going to help this person get a little bit better? You know? And it doesn't work, that tool doesn't work perfectly all the time, but I'd like to believe that it does a good job most of the time. So I think just giving people safe access points where you can't guarantee success, but you're giving them the opportunity to be as successful as they can, as regularly as they can, as they build. That's sort of how I see those access points for new folks.
Absolutely. Nick, what are you thinking?
Dude, how do I get to that gym? That's what I'm thinking. That sounds awesome. Yeah, how far are you from Boston, dude? Yeah, no.
Vancouver's a bit of a trip, but
yeah,
you can make it.
And yeah, we'll wait till I move back. Yeah, no, yeah. What I was thinking about that was I really like what you said. A spark lights a fire. You know, like whenever I was teaching guys anything, whether it be the military or adventures or mountaineering stuff or whatever it is, one thing I noticed that always received well is like people can pick up whether you're generally stoked or not, like whether that thing actually gets you stoked. And I think that's incredibly important. Is when we're bringing people into these things and trying to broaden our community, especially surfing. Like surfing's a weird one for me. Been surfing almost my entire life, and don't get me wrong, I was a jerk local at some points, and every Grom is that kind of they do their thing. But nowadays, obviously it took me a little bit get a little bit older in the military, but it's a sport that's more or less about the spiritual connection with the ocean and a community, and you see it getting nowadays kind of getting trashed, or you see a lot of people coming in and they just want either the clout or to say they're surfers, or they want the vibe. They don't actually, like, I wouldn't say love the art of surfing or the experience of surfing. And you see that, like, when I was in Morocco, I was backpacking through, kind of surfing my way around, and I was meeting people there, and some of those people there were just there to surf. Like, they just love surfing. And people that actually, like, truly love surfing, like what it is to be a surfer, they're always super welcoming to people. They're always like, hey man, you're doing this or this or whatever. Like, how do you like your setup? Hey, you want to hit this spot? They're not gatekeeping for the most part. But it's people that are there that are there for what I would say the wrong reasons, at least in my own personal opinion. That they seem to always try and like keep people out. They want to be very selfish with it. And it's, again, with surfing, it's a replenishable resource. Like, there's always gonna be more waves, dude. Right. So like when you're out there in the water and people are acting like jerks, like it really blows my mind. It's like, why would you try and keep something that can be so special, so transformative to someone's life away from them? This could be something. And there's a group called One More Wave down in San Diego, and they help wounded veterans, dudes who are missing legs or what have you. I said legs, I resist. Arms, legs, appendages, and they specially modify surfboards, or they just get people in the water as a form of adventure therapy. And it's extremely helpful, and it helps tons of dudes down there. And I always get wrapped up around the ideas like, why would people want to gatekeep something so special that can help so many people? And I kind of, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of going on a tangent, but it's this idea that it's such a beautiful experience, and these things that when you're trying to bring someone in, they can tell when you don't actually love that thing. They can tell when it's not genuine. And I think it's one of those things when we're trying to build these communities, and we're trying to build awareness for all these different things and introduce people to adventure therapy and the sports that we love, whether it be mountain biking, skating, surfing, snowboarding, mountaineering, what have you. They can pick up when you don't truly care about the actual event or creating that community around that event. And it's just been one of those, fortunately for me, been very, very grateful that everyone I've interacted with for the most part has always been very genuine and very welcoming. And that's what helped me fall in love with these things, and it's what helped me become a mountaineer. And I, like you, Sean, I wouldn't really call myself a climber. I like to hike a lot of big hills, and every once in a while we do some climbing. But it was, if it wasn't for the community that welcomed me in, and they were extremely genuine people with open arms, just wanted to see me grow in it, and they were excited to see me grow as a climber, mountaineer. That's what helped me do these things and push past my own hardships in these activities. And I think that's an extremely important perspective to have when bringing new people into these things.
Absolutely. Sean, what are your thoughts on this?
So, we're kind of talking about something that I've been puzzling over for several weeks now, actually, several months. And I think a couple of thoughts. One is that, the saying, it takes a spark to start a fire. Well, once the fire is burning, it actually requires more fuel to keep it burning. The spark is the start, but the work is what it keeps burning it. You got to go out there and collect firewood, man. The spark isn't called an eternal spark fire. It's called the spark starts the fire and then get to freaking work keeping that fire alive. And so I see people who are excitable. They see a spark, they get excited about the spark, but then they don't keep the fire burning. They're in and out, in and out. I'm going to go try this for a day. I'm going to go do this for a week. They get up to that brand spanking new sparky fire, but they don't stick around long enough to put fuel on their own fire to actually get it burning long enough that it attracts other people to the fire. And so I've been giving it some thought on how to create a bigger campfire that attracts more people so that they can understand how fires work. And so this morning, coincidentally, wasn't planned. I was in a creative mood. And so I thought, I'm just going to put something out there, maybe some thoughtful stuff on my IG this morning, and hopefully it'll create some thought out there in the community. So maybe Chance, if you could do me a favor, could you pull up the Instagram post that I put up this morning? It's not in my stories, it's in my feed.
Yep. I'll grab it.
And so as I was kind of contemplating this, what I've realized over the last several months is a lot of people hear me talk about things, and I just generally refer to, well, when I was racing mountain bikes, or when I was going on training rides, or when I was rappelling out of a helicopter, or whenever, whatever. I'll reference something casually and then just continue on through the conversation as if it was a non-event or as if it was a non-big deal. But throughout my life, I've had a lot of big deal moments that somehow the abnormal got turned into normal for me. And so jumping out of a perfectly good aircraft, whatever, man, no big deal. But there was a time in my life when it was a big deal, and I've kind of forgotten all of those big deal things. I've normalized the abnormal, and therefore I don't talk about the abnormal stuff because it just seems like not quite yawnerific, but it just seems like no big deal, man. So this morning I thought, man, people know that I get after it a little bit, but I don't like demonstrate the level of get after itness that I've worked through in my life. So this morning I put up a photo, and it's me on a start line. Behind me, you can see, if you use your imagination, 400 other soloists from around the world who are stacked behind me to race at a 24-hour solo world championship down in Canberra, Australia in 2010. And if we're going to talk about age, I was 47 at that time. And the reason that I was on the front of the line is because I was called up to the front of the line, which is pretty standard at the professional level. You get called up if your results demonstrate that you deserve to be on the front of the line. If you're a winner, you get on the front of the line. When the race gun goes, you're at the front of the pack. You're not middle pack. You're not back pack. You're at the front of the pack before the race begins. It's a privilege. It's a bit of an honor. And it's earned. And so I was trying to figure out this morning how best to explain that moments like this photo here are a perfect example of what persistence is. So that moment in time is a result of several years of sweat, blood, and tears in the silence, in the dark, without anyone observing it. That's me grinding away in absence of any applause or validation or nods or congratulations. One day it'll all pay off. That is a result of a lot of work that in a few seconds you get a tiny little spotlight, and then it's back to the next day, the next day, the next day, pursuing the next thing, the next start line, the next finish line, the next pursuit. And so that moment for me is a great representation of what persistence is. I never thought I'd be in that position 10 years prior, but there I am. And so you can have a spark called, I think I'm going to try mountain biking. And then you can go mountain biking with some people who know how to start a little fire. And now you're all sitting around enjoying a little fire. But it's your job as the newbie to not only learn how to work the spark and how to fuel the fire, but how to encourage others to start building their fires and keeping them stoked with this word called persistence. So, I mean, it's a universal concept. You have to be gritty. You have to be persistent. You have to pursue things in life in order to understand what results feel like, what results can produce, what outcomes will change you. And so persistence, I find, is missing in society at a general level. I've got lots of friends who are really gritty and stubborn and persistent and produce results, and I'm a huge fan and they're magnificent. But that's because that's my friend circle who I like to hang out with. I like to hang out with people who kick ass. And so the abnormality of kicking ass is normal in my world. I've taken the abnormal and made it normal. And my friends who are also abnormal feel normal to me. But there's a huge chunk of society that our abnormality is not normal. And so, how best to encourage people to be more persistent in what they pursue? That's what I'm struggling with right now.
That is a very difficult question, and it brings up an interesting thought with the spark and building a fire and all that stuff. Is that I'm assuming everybody here has built a fire from scratch, from nothing, and I think the first mistake I ever made when I was first starting to learn how to do that was I wouldn't prep anything. Right? You get it, you get your stuff ready to get the spark going, and you get it going, and it starts to build, and you're like, excellent. And then you turn around and there's nothing left. And you're like, oh, I don't have any kindling. I don't have any of the next steps set up to build that fire. And to your point, Sean, I think this is where most people struggle with getting into new hobbies or that persistence is that they dive into it, and there's that first week, they get that spark, it's going, hey, I got my little my little spark, and it's set and it's good to go, and they turn around and they have nothing to back it up. They don't have any of the next steps prepared to carry on that fire, so it burns out, and then they're like, oh well, now I got to start over, and they have to start fresh again. They have to reset their entire process and then carry on. So I think that's where the problem lies, is that there's none of the preparatory work that you learn from making that mistake and continually making that mistake over and over again is where you build that persistence. Whereas most people don't even get to that point, because once that spark goes out, they're like, I'm done and moving on to the next thing. What do y'all think, Nick?
Yeah, I think that's gonna be the new litmus test for my friends. If you don't know how to start a fire from scratch, like we can't even be friends. No, I agree, man. I think one of the things I was thinking about with that was seeing that the persistent, like seeing where they're trying to go. I think that helped me a lot. Like when I joined the Army, I was 150 pounds, small, bald, Asian kid, terrified of everything. Like my own fart scared me, kind of stuff. And I remember my first sergeant that I had in basic training, he was a Green Beret. He had he got like shot or something. And then so he had to like get off the line or come off the team, and he took a first sergeant position as a basic training instructor, or as a basic training first sergeant. But anyway, nonetheless, and that was my first time I ever seen a Green Beret. And an 18-year-old kid, the only other Green Beret I saw was John Rambo. And I was like, holy cow, dude! Like these things are real. Like these dudes exist, and he's exactly what you thought. He's like 6'4", great head of hair, handsome as all get out, and an absolute stud. I was like, holy cow, these things are real, dude. And that's what kind of like started my spark. And then I was very fortunate after that. I got to deploy after airborne school. I was kind of laughing when Sean, you're talking about jumping out of airplanes. I remember at airborne school, they would say every jump's a night jump when you close your eyes. And I think the first dozen or so jumps I ever had were just all night jumps, regardless of time of day. But yeah, then I got to Afghanistan as an uplift kid with the 82nd Airborne, and I was attached to 5th Group. And I got embedded with a team of, Green Berets. And they're the ones who kept that fire going. And I don't think if I ever had those guys with me and got to spend that time with them, I probably wouldn't have ended up in the Ranger Regiment or within the Special Operations community as a whole. And it's just, kind of what you're saying, Chance, the idea of having someone there to keep that fire stoked, keep that persistence, keep that grit, and show you that there is a buyout. Like this is the reality of the situation. And if you keep this fire going, you will get there. And it's 100%. I always give credit to these guys. They taught me how to be a quote unquote man and a leader within the United States military. And my entire life was different from meeting them. But if it was every day, they'd come up to me, go to selection, join the community. This is what you got to do. Be a ranger. Every day they hammered it. They did training with me. They did everything. Taught me how to work out. Taught me how to PT. Taught me how to smoke cigarettes, cuss, and fight. The whole dealio. And if it wasn't for these guys keeping that fire alive and stoked for a very impressionable beginning of my career, it probably would have died out and it probably would have gone away. Even though, later to find out, I did have the grit. I did have the perseverance. But I needed someone to pull it out of me. It's kind of like, not to get too cheesy, but that show Yellowstone, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it, they ended up getting a kid in that show, and the main guy was talking to his right-hand man, talking about this kid. And when they're talking about it, he goes, there's a man in there somewhere. It takes a man to pull it out of him. And I think that's a big thing with this, what we're kind of the stuff we're talking about is the grit and the perseverance is, these kids may not have the opportunity to have someone to pull that out of them. They may have that spark get lit. They may see a movie. They may hear a podcast. They may whatever, insert media X. But if they don't have that person out there to help pull that man out of them, to help pull that perseverance and that grit and show them that this exists and there's a payout for all this work, I think it gets extinguished more often than not. And it's incredibly important to have these positive examples in your life and a mentor type figure to help pull this stuff out. Because if I didn't have that team, like I probably did my 3 years, got out and been a bitter veteran somewhere.
Yep. I could see that. Steve, what are you thinking?
You guys are firing me up right now because this feels like my wheelhouse, right? And not in the dramatic examples as you've had in the military, but like the only thing I've been no, not the only thing. One of the things I've been good at in my life is being consistent for others. Like as a teacher, it's force, right? Like these kids don't choose me, right? They're put with me, they're assigned to me, and I certainly don't choose them. Like I've got a real meatball right now, and he is pushing every single button that he can push, and he's doing it in a self-destructive way, but I can see the kid in there, and just like you referenced, there's a man in there somewhere, and if it's my duty to pull that man out of him by being the right guy every single day for him, then that's what I'm going to do. Like it's what drives me. But here's the thing, and Sean, you alluded to it nicely, I think, is that I have been very fortunate to have mentors in my life, like people like transformative people, transformative men in particular, and a couple of women for sure. But transformative men who have just demonstrated what it means to be a sturdy fella, to show up every day, regardless of what's going on. And that is what, like Chancey said it, there's that tinder that's just slowly burning, right? It's smoldering. And if you don't keep blowing on it, you don't keep feeding it, and it's just finger size sticks to get that fire burning, then you put some bigger stuff on there. It is so critical for us to be that finger size stick, and then that kindling, and then that log for the people that we're around every day. Especially when you're dealing with like neurodivergent people, or you're dealing with people with previous micro traumas or macro traumas or whatever layers they're working with, they come to us in a situation that we don't necessarily get the benefit of knowing. Now, in the veteran community, I can only assume that if you're mountaineering with somebody, you've got a pretty solid background of what's happened with that person and the experiences that they've had. So that frames the work that you start to do with them. In a case like mine, where I just get, I'm brand new semester, I got 28 kids in a class, I don't know anything about them. And I purposely try not to find out things about them. Like, when you have the sibling of that roachy kid, you're like, is this kid a roach too? That's not fair to that kid. Right. And I wonder how many times we meet people or we interact with people with some sort of preconceived something where they're like, I know where this goes, but we don't. We don't know where it goes. We have the opportunity, and we have the, I think, responsibility to make sure that we give that person enough chances to find out. And Sean, that leads to persistence, right? Like, because a lot of folks that are in hard places, from my experience, if they get to a hard place, it's because people have given up on them XYZ like 100 times, right? Imagine hearing every day, yeah, you can't do that. I know you won't do that. Now, that person might think they're encouraging somebody to keep going by berating them or giving them a hard time. And that's where the, like, man, nuance is so important in this hustle for sure. Because you have to be able to read people, or have a little bit of ability to read people, to say, I know when to push, I know when to put my foot on the gas, but I also know when to put the hazard lights on, and let's just pull over for a minute and let's kick this around. Right. So I think persistence and consistency they're one and the same. Consistency is what's going to build persistence. But from everything that I've heard so far, it's like we've had people, the relationships we've had have been the consistent thing that has led to our persistence. It's that relationship piece. We've got quality folks around us. And I strongly believe that, like, the youth that are around us, and the adults too, right? Because I've met with some parents recently that are just haywire. It's like, who gave up on you? Because guess what? You better get your ass in gear, and you better start believing in yourself, because this kid is watching you full time. And then your dysfunction is then feeding their dysfunction. And guess what? We have to do a better job. We have to do better with that. Now, this community that's listening right now and speaking right now, we're in the game. Like, we're switched on, we're fired up. So to add to Sean's query, it's like, how do we, because we're consistent folks, we're going to do the job, but how do we then start just to make like little inroads with the folks that aren't? Like what's the extension? Where do we go with this? Because one of my worries, if I'm being honest about podcasting, is like, we're doing a great job here, and I'm jacked up. You guys got me stirred. My question is, the person who's listening now, where are they going to go when this podcast is over? What's supporting this that they're listening to? We're going to be here because we're going to be podcasting and putting out more information, and we're speaking with passion and with heart. But for them, in the actual real world, non-digital world, they're hearing something, it stirs something. And if they don't have a network or somebody around them, what is that next step for them personally? How, like, Sean, you posted that surf clip the other day, right? I think it was just yesterday. You posted that guy getting barreled with the sun backlighting through the tube. And it was like, that fired me up. And I'm a drowner, just so you know. Like, I've tried surfing, and it's the only board sport I can't do at all, but I'm going to learn it at some point in time, because I just don't have the network around me and the access. But I'm going to build it, because I'm a determined person. I have persistence. It will succeed. But to see that photo, it stirred something in me that was physical, it was visceral. Like, I felt it. That's why I reached out to you about it, because it's one of the dopest things I've seen for a little while. But for folks who are like shut off or don't have access to that level of intensity, what starts to build it for them?
Dude, yeah, my own person, I'm with you. I think that's a huge thing. And so, sorry, you got me super stoked. I had a bunch of thoughts pouring in. I had to like try and like filter them out real quick.
Been
got,
there.
got me all jacked up, man. One of the things I think about a lot, and just through my own personal experiences for that, is the idea of being alone. I think for someone who is alone within that idea, that community of like, hey, I got this idea. I want to start working. I want to start doing something different, but like, I don't have the community around me to support that. I think the first step should be the idea of being comfortable alone, and not in this depressive, like, I'm a lone wolf kind of thing. All right. But this idea of like, hey, I don't have anybody around me that is at the level that I want to be at, or I don't have anybody ahead of me, and I don't have to like pursue them and look at them and have those conversations and have a mentor. You got to be comfortable with being in your own skin and by yourself. And I think that's the power of meditation and journaling, and something I recommend to a lot of dudes, especially transitioning out of the military. Because Because a lot of times, I mean, for people that don't know, guys will get out of the army or military and they'll go back home. And a lot of times, if they've been like in a combat unit or something like that, they'll go back home and feel alienated, and that's where like the real loneliness and the real depression comes in. And then they're just kind of floundering. They're like, well, what do I do? Do I kind of get back in with the old crew? None of them kind of get me. And unfortunately, for those who have seen, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, those who've seen combat and got to experience that will go back home to maybe a small, slow place, and nothing ever registers, and they just kind of lose themselves in that. And I think there's a ton of power understanding how to be alone in a constructive way. And then through that, you learn how to be with yourself, be in your own space, be in your own mental space. That old adage, there's nothing more dangerous than a man alone with his own thoughts. And if you learn how to be in that place alone with your own thoughts and not let them just consume you and control you, well, then you can start to, find other communities, a podcast like this, or a different community on social media or what have you. And then you can kind of be alone and start to reach out to those. And then you start to grow from there. Then you start to, maybe I can go do this thing and be bad at it by myself. One of my friends from climbing, she was telling me a story when she learned how to snowboard. She was like, you know what? No one's going to teach me. I'm just going to do it by myself. And she showed up to a mountain by herself with like not even, like just literally just like wet weather gear and cold weather gear, and was like, let's figure this out. And luckily, a group of other girls there saw her, just be like, they're like, what the hell are you doing, dude? No, come here. We're going to take care of you. And they gave her first snowboarding setup and all that jazz. But, like you got to learn how to be comfortable alone and be in that space by yourself. And then that will give you the power to go do these things that you want to do alone. And then through doing those things alone and being comfortable in that space alone, you'll tend to meet others and meet people in that community that you want to be part of. And it's terrifying in the beginning, but that's where I think a lot of it goes, is because you get that initial spark and like, what do I do with this? All right, now there's a fire. I saw something awesome. Well, then, you may never build up the courage to actually like go pursue that thing because there's no one here to pursue it with you. And then it dies out. So I think there's a lot of power. The next step for a lot of people who get stoked on this stuff is start spending time journaling, start spending time meditating, and understanding how to be alone with yourself and your thoughts. That way you can overcome the fear of doing things alone. And then you can actually start reaching out and getting engaged with these communities.
Absolutely. Sean, thoughts on this?
Well, Chance, you'd come in talking about the fire. You get your kindling going. You've feathered your sticks. You've put your little teepee together. You've sparked it up. It's now burning. Yay, Chance Burrows is a winner. Turns over, looks for more fuel. What? We're step 2. So that's where we left things off. And so I think, I don't see the failure at step 2. I see the failure before step 1 starts. Even as they're building step 1, even as they're lighting step 1, even as they're stepping back and thinking, wow, look at me, I just started a fire. None of that matters unless the person knows why they started building the fire. Why are they there? What are they doing? What's the point? To bring it into the 3-dimensional real world, there's reasons to start fires, obviously. But no one needs a fire until you desperately need a fire. And so it's when that desperately need a fire occurs, you're within minutes of hypothermic death, we'll call it. It's in the moments that you really need a fire where you get hit upside of the head with the harsh reality of, I don't know how to feather a stick. I don't know how to do step 1. Doing step 1 with the luxury of no harsh outcome because you blew step 2, there's no learning in that. Because you look over your shoulder, think, dang, I forgot to collect my fuel. I'll give it another try tomorrow. Tomorrow is a groundhog day of, dang, I forgot my fuel. Because there's nothing contingent. There's no harsh requirement for someone to learn how to do step 2. It's just another shoulder shrug and I'll give it another try tomorrow. But when you're on death's door, when you definitely need that fire to save your life, things become a lot more serious. Now you're really paying attention to how you feather your stick. Now you've only got 1 match left. And that match, you're figuring out how to strike it perfectly rather than strike it too hard and break the matchstick in half. Now you're holding on to a little match and you're doing your little routine. That's not the time to learn how to start a fire when you're on death's door. But guess what? Brohemages, we're all on death's door. On the freaking daily. It's right around the corner, man. We all got issued the egg timer when we were born. You flip it upside down the moment that you do the wah, wah, you're into existence, the egg timer started. That's it, that's all, man. We're locked in to the moment where we all die. And so, how is it that someone can casually every day botch a fire, whereas someone else on their first time with just one match can start a fire? It's usually because there's some sort of understanding of the importance of life. You're on death's door, you're going to really try hard. You think that you're never going to die, you keep shrugging your shoulders every day and wonder where your fuel is for step 2. Because there's no consequence, there's no seriousness in it. I'm going to pull up what I said in that post just because the photo really doesn't cover off the importance of my point that I'm trying to make right now. Persistence is best understood at moments like this, where the obviousness of the years of preparation and prior results create the opportunity. You can't buy your way to the front of these kinds of startup lines. They can only be earned. And it's in the earning that you can understand the intersection between persistence and opportunity. We all have opportunity in our future, our unknown opportunities. They're stacked up just around the corner, just like freaking death. We're racing opportunity and death. And it's how much you get to accomplish before you die, or how little you do in your life before you die. That is the intersection of realizing that you either were persistent in everything that you pursued or you weren't. Because when you're on death's door, when you're on your deathbed, you get to look back and think, I forgot to stack up the fuel. I forgot step 2. Or you can lay on your deathbed surrounded by people who've enjoyed the frickin' campfires that you've been burning all of those years that they got to sit at, that they learned how to start their campfires at. We all have the choice, all of us. And I think that a lot of people give up their choice. It's literally a branching decision. Do I want to give up, or do I want to make the world a better place? Just like you were saying, the meatball that you've got right now, Steve, the character who's giving you a little bit of pushback, he just doesn't understand the difference between what's around the corner for him. Awesomeness or death. Awesomeness you get to enjoy day after day after day. Death you get once, and maybe a complete absence of enjoyment. So, the meatball gets to decide, do I get to enjoy my life, or do I get to exist and die?
Dropping mics. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, and just so Sean, like you had brought up earlier, this idea that you've been struggling with, and this is one I've been struggling with too, right? Because this meatball, I'm giving him a chunk of my time to help him find his way towards awesomeness as opposed to death. Like it's because of like I'm slowly building with this kid. Like, but here's where I get, ooh, this is a big idea, but I've been working with for a while. It's the idea of equality versus equity. Equality doesn't exist. It can't exist. In the infrastructures that we have around us, equality it really isn't a thing, but equity is. Because what equity is the opportunity to start where somebody else starts. Right? Like that's what equity is. And guess what? Equity isn't for free. Equity has a cost. If you want an opportunity, you better work hard enough to get to the start line with everybody else, because now you've been given the opportunity and you're all starting behind that tape. When that tape drops, guess what? Everybody's equal. You've created opportunity to be in an equitable position starting. Doesn't mean you're not going to get your ass kicked. You probably are, especially if you're just getting going. But you created and worked hard enough to get to the opportunity. That's what equity is. Meatball, who I'm working with, he feels like the world is doing him an injustice. The world's against him. No, 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 no. The world's not against him. His decisions are taking him out of the starting grid. The equity is still there for him. The world is not doing him a disservice. His choices are. But it's getting people to reframe their thinking that I have to earn the right to be on the start line. I have to work towards the opportunity to be on the start line with everybody else. It's not just given. And that's where, I mean, I've spoken about it before, so I won't get into it, but it's like this idea of entitlement is just so, it's just so toxic. Like, to think we're entitled to anything other than, necessities and basics. But we're not entitled to anything. We have to create opportunity for ourselves sometimes, or work towards opportunity. We can't just expect it to be given to us, right? So I think that that's one thing. The other area, well, maybe I won't go here. No, I think I'll just leave it with that. But no, I'm going to go there. Sean, you had mentioned the idea of abnormal, right? Like, our abnormal lives that we have lived have created a new sense of normal for us. Um, I wonder if culture and society is in a place right now where even the idea of living differently than the masses is so uncomfortable for them that that's one of the things that puts a barrier up for them. They don't want to feel abnormal. So I've really consciously, in my language choices, working with most of the school year, I've started changing my language to non-typical, right? Like, because there's such this negative connotation around negative psychology, right? Like, for 150 plus years, we've been studying what's wrong with people. There's only about an 8 or 9 year history that I'm aware of, and I'm not well educated, but I've done a little bit of work with it. There's only an 8 or 9 year history of what's known as positive psychology, studying what's right with people. And I find that people are generally far more turned on to the idea of doing something unique, or doing something extraordinary, or doing something that's non-typical. So I've started removing abnormal or normal from my language choices and replacing it with typical or non-typical, just because it has a bit more positive. From my experience working with kids, it just has a more positive reaction from them, as opposed to hearing abnormal versus normal. And I wonder if even that's just such a simple thing we can do in our day-to-day life to start spreading out these ideas that we're talking about, is just like framing it in a way as like, yeah, you know what, that dude is not very typical, but it sure sounds exciting, as opposed to him being like, oh, look at that dude, he's abnormal, he's a weirdo. I can't even connect with what that guy's about. So I wonder if that's a starting place.
Interesting. Nick, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I like what you're saying about the typical, non-typical. You could kind of reiterate what I said before. Like, man, I love weirdos. Like it's one of the things I notice. Being here at the school is I'm around. So I live in the dorms, right? This is my dorm room I'm sitting in right now, and the reason I elected to live in a dorm room, like, A, it's fiscally more responsible than having an apartment in Boston. But two, I was very curious to see what kind of kids are able to come to a school like Harvard at 18 years old. Like, they're non-typical kids, right? Like, I remember when I was in middle school earlier, it's pretty much all I want to do is try and figure out how to talk to a girl and what I could smoke weed out of. Other than those two things, I had not much going on in my life at 14 years old. And most of these kids were like, I'm going to go to Harvard. And that's a little late for 14 to be like, I'm going to go to Harvard. But yet, so for them, middle school, their entire life has been getting here, and it's a very non-typical pathway. But when they're here, one of the things I know is just general population demographics is they're all trying to be normal still. They've been non-typical or abnormal their entire life with their work ethic and grinding, but once they get here around a quote unquote like homogeneous demographic of all kids who are high achievers, they all strive to be normal again, and they don't want to like be on the fringe of anything. And I just find that just in the idea very interesting, because like if they all, and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people here who are pursuing amazing things, and a lot of these kids are going on to do great amazing stuff, but I'm always curious, like, how much more could they impact the world in a positive if they were all trying to just do what they wanted, what they didn't feel was cool or didn't fit in or whatever. There's like, hey man, this is the non-typical thing I like let's chase this down and see what happens. And it ends up being some of the kids that I've become friends with. But it's just, I find that very interesting to see, and almost kind of makes me a little sad to think about the idea that a lot of people will spend a lot of their life trying to fit in and be normal and get this acceptance from others, when if they just did what they wanted and what made them feel happy, well, then they'd cut out all the bullcrap and get right to a community that accepts them for who they are. and there'd be a lot more joy and a lot more awesomeness in their life, and they'd be surrounded by a community that enables them and allows them to do all kinds of rad stuff. It's just, yeah, sorry, I just kind of went on a tangent, but it's just a very interesting observation that you're saying with you're observing with kids there, and I'm seeing it with the younger generation that I'm engaged with now. It's just, how do you drive home the idea of like, it's okay and it should be encouraged to be non-typical, to kind of walk outside the lines and do what you want and think freely and do, like, one of the kids I get along with really, really well here, smart, he does like biomedical engineering, right? Genius kid. And instead of doing like personal financing or investment banking internships every summer, he goes and fights wildfires in Alaska as a 19-year-old. You're like, what, dude? Like, that's insane, right? But he's one of those kids who's just comfortable being by himself, and he's like, hey man, I'm gonna do whatever makes me happy, no matter what that looks like. And I was immediately drawn to him, and he's also just like a savage in the gym. But it's, when I see kids like him, I'm like, dude, what would happen if everybody here thought like that and just did what they thought would make them happy, and regardless of the social opinion of their actions? Yeah, sorry, kind of tangent.
No, it's all good, man. It's a great thing. It actually brings me back to a point that I'd written down earlier, which was staying open to yourself.
Just on that point,
And
Steve, I
think
think
that's kind of what we're talking about here, is the fact that you,
so. For me,
in order
to talk about
really
lecture, because dude, I
achieve
love
the
neuroscience,
things
right?
that
That's
you want
my
to
jam.
do
Not great at it,
when
but I love
you're
it.
younger,
Just like
you
most
have to
things I
stay
do.
open to yourself to be able to
But a lot of
continue
lectures
those
are
things,
they,
where if you
dude,
start
I'd
to
rather just get
closed
hazed all
off,
day.
where you start to think, well, this is what's
But what helps me
expected of me
with
or
that is the
not,
idea of transferable
then that starts
skills.
to
And to what you're saying about the
starts
greater
to
point of
it
things
starts to limit your
and how to narrow
opportunities.
it down.
One of my
Obviously, I think
my
it's really
big
important
regrets
to
now
drive a
at
perspective shift.
41
And
is
to what Sean was
I
saying
got
earlier, is like
offered to
we
go
do
on the
so
dive
many
course when
abnormal
I
things, we
was back
forget
in the regiment,
what's
and
abnormal
I was like,
to
no, I
people.
don't want to do that because I want to be
Sometimes
killed.
I'll
I
just
don't
be
want to
talking to a
dive.
kid here and be like, yeah, I was
Didn't
doing this
realize at
thing
the
and da
time,
da
but
da da da, and we're in a
by being
valley
a
in an
diver, I
ambush,
would
and I
have
was
gotten
cracking a
more
joke to my buddy
opportunities
and
to
like,
be a jumper
wait, you were in
as
an
well. But
ambush? And like, yeah, but
the
it's a gunfight,
the
whatever, dude.
point
Anyway,
is that
so my
I
buddy
was
were
not
talking,
open
and
to
then
that
like you forget
opportunity
what the
because
things
I had
are.
something stuck in
And
my head. It wasn't open to
to
myself.
like,
I
to
just
take
knew
that back a
that
little bit,
I wanted
is
X,
you
and
give
I
them those
didn't care
little
about anything else.
victories of like the
And I wasn't
extraordinary. And
allowing
like to
myself
someone
to the
who,
openness, or
for
allowing
example, who's
myself to be open
never
to the
put
world,
themselves in
to what
extreme
is being
cold,
offered, to what is
having them go in
out
an
there
ice bath for
for
30
me to
seconds
be
might be
better,
extraordinary. Like
to
that might
allow
rock
me
their
to
world
get
and be
better,
like,
to
holy crap,
engage
I was in a
better, go
bucket of
on
ice for
better.
30 seconds for
And I think
15
that's what
seconds,
we're
and it's
hitting
just
on,
like
because at
these
the
little
very
things. Like
beginning
when
we
I
started
take
with
people surfing for the
stories
first
of
time,
shoulda, woulda, coulda.
like I'm not taking them
Right
out, we're not
from,
trying
we
to get
started
barreled like
talking
that,
about
dude, by any
the
means. I'm in
mountain that
like
you could have
waist
climbed at
deep
that point
water,
in
knee
time.
deep water, and I'm
We
trying
started
to get them
talking
on the
about the things that
smallest
you
roller
could have
possible on a
done
15-foot board.
but
Right?
didn't.
They might as well
Looking
just be
back
standing
now,
on land.
maybe those
But nonetheless,
opportunities
they're
have
surfing, right?
changed
And
things.
they're out there doing a thing. And
But
for
at the
me,
same point, this is, I'm going to postulate this to you guys as well.
I'd rather be doing other stuff. But nonetheless, like
Without
for
those
them, that's
moments,
extraordinary. They,
without
a
those
lot of
things to
them may
look
have never
back
been
on
in
and
the
go,
ocean
oh,
before,
I
and they're,
botched that one.
first time in the ocean, and
We
they're
would not be
riding
where we are
a
today.
surfboard in the
We would
wave.
not be sitting here
And
discussing
to
this
them, that little
for
thing is
that next
extraordinary. And if you
generation to
can
go, oh,
show them, like, hey, dude, you were
and
capable of
maybe
doing
latch
this
on to something
super
like that.
rad thing
So
to you
what do
and
you guys
your
think on
perspective,
that?
this is
That
huge. And then take those and then keep
challenges,
building upon those small little
the shoulda, woulda,
victories.
coulda
And
moments,
before you know it, you get to the point where they're doing these
regretful
wild stuff,
points
and you're
where
like,
we
hey, man,
watched
like
it
6 months
have
ago, you
led
couldn't
us
even
to
do
a
a
position
pull up.
that now we
And
can
now you're doing tons of them with
engage
weight.
those
You know what I mean?
directly for
And
everyone
you
else
just
beyond
kind
that.
of keep building these little victories. And
So
I
a
think
couple of
that's
things, actually
when I
three
think
things.
about trying to
First
get
thing
people with
is
that perspective of like,
normal
you can
versus
do wild
abnormal.
stuff too.
I use
And that's
those
kind of what I'm
words
trying to do with all the
carefully,
mountain climbing
actually,
stuff. Like,
because
very
I know that
fortunate
it
to have had the career
irritates
that I've
some
had.
people
But
who
at the
want
end
to
of the day, like, I'm a
reframe
pretty
the
normal
words
dude. Like
into
all
more
things considered, like I'm
palatable words.
5'8",
Well, screw
and
your
not that athletic,
sensitivities.
right? But what it
Because
comes
you're
down to
either
is like I've been
normal
shown that
or you're
you
freaking
can do these
abnormal.
things, and you just keep
That's
stacking
it. That's
small.
all.
Like
And if you
eventually,
don't
if
like
you
the
keep moving
term, you're a
sand
normie,
into a pile, it'll
bro,
eventually
you're a
become a
normie.
mound, and that mound will become like a mountain,
Well,
right?
now you get to do
And you just
something
got to
about
keep
it
doing that
if it
over and
irritates
over
you.
and over
And if
again,
it doesn't
showing them that
irritate
through
you,
this process,
then you'll
you
never
will get to the
pursue
point where
the
you're doing the
abnormal.
wild stuff. And then to like the
And in
original
my
quote we were
world
talking about, like, dude, I think about this
that
all
I've
the time
lived
of
in,
like the things that have happened in
there
our
used to
lives
be
to
a
put us
lot
to
of
where we are.
abnormal,
I remember
but I've
when I got out of the
normalized a lot
military,
of
and it was
it,
before I knew I
and
was
it
going
ain't
to Harvard and
abnormal
start school.
anymore. And that's what
I
allows
was
me
going
to
through the
kick
regret cycle.
ass
I think a
at the
lot of people
levels
do
that
whenever
I've
they're in big
kicked it
transitions. Like,
at.
man, if I did
Like
this differently,
Nick,
if I did
before I
that
joined
differently,
the
da 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 da
military,
da.
I
But now
weighed
that I'm here and doing what
135
I'm doing and
pounds,
kind kind of very
I
fortunate
got
to
a
be on the
big old
tracks that I'm
set
on.
of
I
British
realize that
ears
if all
on me
these things didn't
that are
happen, all
easy
these
to
bad things
flick.
didn't happen in my life, I
And I
wouldn't be the
took
person
some
I am
ass
now. And to
whoopings
look
as an
back and say like,
underperforming
well,
skinny
when I was
kid
in the military,
before
I
I
was in a
joined the
very
army.
long-term
And
relationship,
then when I
and that ended
joined,
up not
I took
going
some
very
ass
well,
kickings
and that caused a whole bunch of
because I
drama in
was
my
a
life and a whole bunch of
normie.
bad stuff.
And I had to
then
figure out how to
all that bad
pursue
stuff ended up in a
abnormal
night
and
before I was
make
going to
it
go to
normal
special forces
so that
selection
the
out of
world
Ranger
didn't
Regiment to be a Green
scare me
Beret
anymore.
before I was
Like
getting out of the
yourself, Nick.
Army. I want to
And
go
so
ride scooters with my buddy
I
drunk in
was,
downtown Tacoma.
maybe
The
we were
Lime
the
scooters
same
drop.
dude
So
when
now
we
it's
were little
raining. We're pissed
kids.
drunk.
Maybe we
We're
were
riding
the
scooters
same dude when
downhill,
we
and I
joined
fall
into
and
the
dislocate my
military.
shoulder.
But we
And
were
that offsets my
definitely
entire timeline.
different
Ends up I don't go to
dudes
selection,
once we'd
and
gone
a
through
whole
the
different cascade
process.
of events
Now I can
take
laugh in the
place.
face of
But through
danger.
that branch in the road, that cascading
Whereas
events,
when I was
I
a
was eventually get
kid,
to the point where I briefed
everything
President Trump,
appeared
former President
dangerous.
Trump, in
And
Afghanistan
so I
on a tactical
think
robotics program
when
that
I
I created.
say normal and
Right? And that wouldn't have
abnormal
happened if all
to
those bad
someone,
things didn't happen
I'm
first. And then through
sometimes trying to
that
get under
timeline
their
of things,
skin.
briefing the president, well, now I'm at
Just
Harvard
like I
studying
am right now
neuroscience,
for the
right? And I don't
entire
think I'd be
interwebs.
here if
You're
it
all a
wasn't
bunch of
for those
normies,
cascading events.
unless
And
you're pursuing
so to say that
abnormality
I
to
regret
make that
anything
normal.
I've done in my
It's
past
literally the
would say that I
definition of the
regret I'm the
word.
person
There's
I
only
am
two
now.
things that play
And I
against
don't.
each
I'm
other:
very happy. And
normal
granted, this is a
or
very specific case. It's
abnormal.
me. It's anecdotal.
Now,
But I think for a lot of
when
people,
I'm in a
on the bigger
nicer
picture, in the
mood,
grand scheme of
when I'm
things,
not in a
to
pushback
look
mood,
at
when
a
I'm
life
not
of
trying to
regret
get
and be
under your
like, hey man, I
skin
don't like the
mood,
way that happened, is to
I
say that
use
you
the
don't like who you are
terms
now. And even if there's
ordinary
things in your
and
life you don't like,
extraordinary.
I promise you
In
there's
order
things,
to
there's something in
become
your life you do like.
extraordinary,
That thing in your life you
you've
do
got to
like
do
wouldn't
more
be that
than
thing
the
if it wasn't for all the
ordinary.
bad stuff that happened beforehand. I think it's
That's it.
important to
That's
kind of
all. That's
focus
how
on that
those two
concept and
words are
idea. Like,
related
this
to
is
each
an
other at the
important
hip.
thing,
You're
because
either
without these mistakes,
ordinary
without these
or you're
victories and losses that you've
extraordinary.
had in your
And in
life,
order to
you wouldn't
become
be here, and you wouldn't
extraordinary,
be able to
you've got to
then
freaking
pivot
do
on that
extra.
point and do great things in the world. There's
And
this
that'll
guy
never
named Alex
change,
Hormozy. He
ever.
business dude,
You
talks a
can't
lot
show
about
up on the
mindset and
start line
stuff.
as a normie and expect to be on the
And I nearly
podium
forgot my point.
unless every other person quits in front of you. Now you get to be the normie on the podium
Thank you.
because everyone quit. And it's at that point that you get to decide, what does this moment even mean? I'm the only person standing on the podium because everyone quit. Am I now the winner? Well, that's something to super chew on for the rest of your life. The delta between normie and abnormal, ordinary and extraordinary. A lot of people, as they're growing up in today's modern world, are being given ribbons and trophies and medals for attending. It's a participation trophy now. And so if you're being handed trophies every second weekend as a kid, thinking that you're extraordinary for showing up and attending, you're in for a rude awakening. If you think that you're extraordinary because you got driven to your soccer practice, you ain't. The only way that you can reference where you're at in the world in respect to me versus me 10 years ago, or me versus the person standing next to me as a peer orientation as to where I'm at, is by truly looking at where you're at. Look down at your feet and see if you're on the start line of a 24-hour solo world championship, or look down at your feet and see if they're attached to your coffee table as you watch Netflix. That's called reality. Normal versus abnormal. It is not normal to be standing on a 24-hour solo world championship start line. It is not. Even though there was 400 people at that one, that's 400 abnormal people. But none of us feel abnormal because we've normalized the lifestyle that it takes to get to that point. But from an outside perspective, or from a spectator's view, as they're cheering and clapping and looking at that start line as the gun's about to go off, all they see is the freak show. And we were talking about this the other day, Chance, when we were talking about selection in special operations, special forces selection, working within Tier 1 special operations with Randy Turner and Dean Goebel. And the conversation came up that, and I said it, the only way that you can understand the freak show is by being in the freak show, period. You can watch all the Hollywood movies you want. You can attend all of the cocktail parties you want. You can do whatever you freaking want in your world. But you'll never understand that world until you're in the world of freak showdom. As a spectator watching a 24-hour world championship about to kick off, you can't understand what's happening other than the visual perspective of, look at those freaks. And it's the same for anything in life where it requires abnormal effort to get to where you're going to get to in order to cross that start line. It requires extraordinary to be extraordinary. But from an outside perspective, you'll never understand what that extra is until you're literally starting on the start line of some kind of freak show. And there's loads of freak shows out there. You don't have to be tier one. You don't have to be a 24-hour soloist. You don't have to be ... Life is a freak show. You don't have to sign up for a sport or hobby or an event. Your life is a freak show as long as you act accordingly, as long as you pursue like a freak, as long as you think like a freak. To Nick's point, normies bore me. That's it. Normal people bore me. And it's not that I dislike them. It's just that we have very little in common, other than the million other people like them who like to eat SpaghettiOs for dinner or whatever. That doesn't interest me at all. I like the fringe of society. I like the extreme of society. I like to observe people who I think are freaks in order for me to pursue the freakiness of that, whatever that is. I don't pursue normal. I find normal to be uninspiring. I pursue people who are out there on the edge with their hair on fire, wondering where the fire extinguisher is, but not looking too hard for the fire extinguisher, and going off out of view across the horizon with me left scratching my head thinking, where's that dude going? And why isn't he putting his hair out? That's what I like to see. That's what I like to be left with as a thought is, what even just happened there right now? And how do I get a chunk of that? I'm not a surfer at all. I've stood up on a surfboard a handful of times, and the only thing that was impressive about my surfing was how far the surfboard shot out from underneath me and disappeared across the horizon as I couldn't stand on a board. I'm not a surfer. But yesterday, to Steve's point, I saw a random clip on the internet. It's not like I pursue surfing videos. It just randomly popped up in my feed. It was beautiful, man. This moment, it's up in my Instagram stories. I don't know if it's still there, Chance. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it's a beautiful scene, man, because there's two things occurring in that clip. One is a dude just drops into this wave that curls over top of him, and the light coming through the wave and highlighting him in the moment is beautiful, man. The dude just totally owns the moment. He just zens out. He's like right in it, owning that freaking wave, owning himself, owning the moment. And he looks like a freaking warrior monk as he's doing it. I loved it, man. I've never experienced that in a surf wave, but I've experienced it in my life. And the old saying goes, you've got to be it to see it, or game recognizes game, or you've got to have kicked some ass to understand that dude can kick ass. And again, I'm not a surfer, but what I did see in the moment was a dude who was nailing it. The cinematographer was also nailing the moment. The light was beautiful, man. I mean, visually, it was so stunning that it still burned in my mind's eye. It's a surfing moment that I would easily categorize as top 3 magical moments that I've ever seen of any surfdom. But again, I don't understand surf, but I do understand rad. And I think that this is the difference between normal and abnormal.
Let's take a look.
Can you expand that in any way?
No, unfortunately, I can't.
All right, it's too bad. It's beautiful when it's expanded.
Yeah, the limitations of the mechanism, unfortunately. But it is absolutely gorgeous. That is.
It's a beautiful scene, and the dude is so zen. And you know that's an accumulation, that split second, just like me pouncing off of the start line at Worlds in 2010. That dude pouncing into that wave in that moment is a world championship moment to my eyes. Now, that could be on the daily for him. It's neither here nor there. But for me, from my perspective, what I saw was a freaking champion owning the moment like a Zen warrior monk. And if you've been in the game of abnormal, you can spot abnormal from a mile away, even when they're making it look normal.
Absolutely. Steve, any thoughts on any of this?
Will always have all the thoughts. Yeah, I think that, and Sean, just when you put up that reel, it was a while ago now, but you did the ordinary versus extraordinary. It was just like a public call out. You're like, what else do I need to say? I played that for all my classes, and I still have that one saved. And when the moment is right, I will play it for my current crop of kids as well. And it's like, yeah, to do more, to do extra, I think is like, it's just, I mean, it's not on this audience and in this crew. It's like, it's a given. Like, you're just going to do more because we want to see versions of ourselves that are optimized. Like, kids, and my lens is getting it's pretty youth focused right now. Um, Kids just have this idea of getting better. And I'm not sure they understand what the word better even means because it has no context for them. It has no parameters, right? I find that once again, language use and it like I say, it's minutia, right? But or nuance. But when you think about it being an optimized version of yourself, what does optimization actually mean? Well, it means my mind better be optimized, my spirit better be optimized, and my physical body better be optimized because that creates opportunity, it creates access, it creates positive feelings, it creates success, it creates um, one step closer to the freak show, right? And so I think that what I'm hearing and what I'm going to definitely bring into my work week this week as I'm working with kids is that, if their spark is lit, I'm going to be a person for them to help feed the fire. If they don't have parameters for themselves, I'm going to help them establish parameters so that they become an optimized version of themselves. I still am, if I'm being honest, I am struggling a little bit with the taking the scope of what I hope the collective is and what it will be and the access points that it becomes for people, the normies. And I still do struggle a little bit with the idea of how to access normal and making it extraordinary if we're going to blend the terminology, right? And I so for me, when I'm boots on the ground in the high school, and that's a very different context and connotation to what your boots have been on the ground, you fellas who have served, but it's like, I wonder if the normies could frame it for themselves a little bit as like, no, I am going to put my boots on and I'm going to engage the world around me. I'm going to engage the people that I encounter on the daily, whatever that means to them, right? Because if they start to do that, then they will start to create this sense of success that can lead to optimization. And it's just like a weird hybrid. Like, there's a lot of ideas in my head right now, but I'm trying to find the tip of the spear. Like, where do we take all of these bigger ideas and just start to create a focus and a narrowing of it so that on Monday, when you step into whoever's listening, when they step into whatever it is they're going to do on a Monday, whether it's Nick going to class for the potentially most boring lecture he's ever heard, like, how does he stay at the tip of the spear in terms of engagement, right? Like, what mindset does he have to have, or does anybody have to make sure that they're switched on and not just passively being on autopilot, just moving through space? I think that's where I'm a little bit stuck. I feel like my mind is having a tough time um, rationalizing how to take the big concepts and the big ideas I love, and hopefully you can feel that I love the conversation today. But I do wonder, like, when I walk in the building on Monday, am I going to be able to help folks find that optimal version with these big ideas? That's where I'm at.
Interesting. Nick, what are you thinking? I like it.
Well, let me make your point for you. This probably wasn't your point, but it's my point. You know, Alex Hormozy, in my world, like in my head, he's not a big deal. Like I look at his resume, big deal. But you know what he is a result of? Chipping away with a big focus on getting better and blah, blah, blah. Now he's a big deal. But in my head, he's not a big deal. But he is a big deal. Like he says good things, he encourages people in positive ways, he's helping improve the planet and all of that good stuff. Round of applause for Hormozy. But he's not my shtick. Because I look at him and I think, big freaking deal. What have you done, dude? But he's done a ton of things. So that's my judginess, where I look at him and think, whatever. But I recognize that he's freaking awesome, but just in a different way that doesn't vibe with me. Because again, I just don't see him as a big deal. I'll never accomplish the things that he's accomplished. I'll never have the impact that he's having. I'll never own 27 Lamborghinis. But in my world, he's not a big deal, and therefore he doesn't resonate with me. Though I track him on Instagram, I like some of the things he says. I like how he purports himself. I like the changes that he's making in society. But he's not my cup of tea because, again, his trajectory doesn't impress me. Whereas the guys on this panel impress me. And is anyone here a Hormozy? No. Ever be? Probably not. But isn't it interesting how we self-select, or at least it's interesting to me how I self-select who I think is mega, who I think is impactful, who I think is running it the way that I like to see it run. And I'm not throwing Hormozy under the bus and saying that dude sucks. I'm just saying he just doesn't resonate with me. Because again, his resume doesn't impress me. He's an impressive man with an unimpressive resume. Maybe that's the best way I can explain it. And so I think that it's important to have Hormozys across the entire scale of I hate that dude, all the way through to I love that dude. We all need maybe not figureheads or virtual avatars, or maybe we just need something that encourages us to try harder, to want more, to be better, to speak differently, to listen differently. I look at Hormozy, and again, he's not my cup of tea, doesn't resonate with me. And I've thought about it, man. I've thought about what is it about this dude that just doesn't vibe with me. And I just think it's his background. And I respect the man. It's just that I don't respect his service. I've said it before. If you've served in your country, I'll respect your service. But that doesn't mean I've got to respect the man. Like if you're a goof, if you served in a mega career in the military and you always were the man, but then when you bounce out and now you're that dude who never puts away his shopping cart, you're the guy who pulls out the cigarette, sparks it up, and throws the cigarette wrapper over your shoulder as you walk into whatever restaurant. If you're the guy who parks in the handicap parking lot or the parking spot and doesn't think anything about it other than as you're yet throwing another hamburger wrapper on the ground as you walk into whereversville, like if you're that dude, even though you had a mega career in the military, I'll respect your service, but I won't respect the man. And it goes the same to Hormozy. I'll respect what he's doing. It doesn't mean that I've got to respect his background, because to me, he doesn't have one that resonates with me. How funny that I can cherry pick who I like and who I don't like. Why I don't like and why I do like, I don't know. Maybe 2 years from now, I'll like Hormozy way more than I like him right now. For now, I'm lukewarm on him, but also understanding that he's doing good stuff. And so I guess what that illustrates to me is that there's someone out there for everyone. There's a Hormozy out there for everyone. Maybe it's, what's his name there? Chris Williamson. What's his name? Chris Chris Williams
Yeah, Chris Williams or Williams,
or
I can't remember. But Will
whatever.
X, the Modern Wisdom is where it come from.
Modern Wisdom. I like that guy, man. I like him better than I like Hormozy. And interestingly enough, most recent Hormozy clip I saw was on Modern Wisdom show, where they're both chirping. And somehow I kind of like the host more than I like Hormozy, even though the host has got even less of a resume. I mean, he came on the scene as a male model, as far as I can understand, and has built himself out into an excellent host, an excellent speaker, an excellent podcaster, bringing great value to the world. Now he's mega, and I like him. And I don't know why. He just kind of vibes with me, even though his resume in my world is weak. So how does it work? How are humans attracted to other humans and their awesomeness? And yet the guy sitting across the table from Modern Wisdom, Hormozy, doesn't vibe with me. Though they're saying the same things, though they're nodding on the same aspects, though they're both doing handshake deals right there in the moment with full nods and smiles. We're both on the same sheet of music, bro, is what they're saying in that moment. And yet one I can kind of get with, and the other one I can't get with. It must be the judgy in me. It must be the vibe in me. It must be I don't know what it is, but I know we've all got it. And I've met tons of people who say, I don't judge. Bro, you judge. We all judge. To whatever degree, whether it's 0.147%, or whether it's 97%. Everyone judges the environment around them. That's how we stay alive. That's how we survive, by taking the bandwidth all around us, running it through a filter in our brain, and understanding this is what's happening in this moment. And why don't I like that guy? I don't know, but I'm just going to keep moving forward. We all do it. So, Nick, if you like Hormozy, what is it about Hormozy that you appreciate?
Yeah, my big thing is how open he is, transparency. I really, I appreciate someone who's willing to kind of be open with how they're doing a lot of things, or appears to be open on how they're kind of going about the process and their journey. And one of the things I appreciate for anybody who's in that level of spotlight is admitting when they're wrong about stuff. So, he'll go through a podcast and be like, yeah, no, I was wrong about marketing. I said this in 2000, whatever. That was completely wrong. This is how my perspective has changed. And to someone at that level of, whether you want to call it celebrity or impact, to admit they're wrong and how they're wrong and what they're doing now, and that's different from what they were before, is something I'm a huge fan of. And I believe his intent is generally good, right? He always talks about, he's just trying to become a billionaire, and he's trying to show others how to do it along his pathway. And that's something I appreciate, is honesty, transparency, and the ability to admit when you're wrong, humility.
I like it. Steve, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's right in Nick's camp. It's people who are willing to be vulnerable enough to admit when they're wrong and just say, "Hey, look, I was off center on this one, or I was just straight up wrong." I think that takes that to me indicates a level of integrity that I appreciate in people. Coming back to Nick's thought about the cascade effect, it's I very much appreciate that thought. And it was Seb's partner Alex. We were hosting the mental health walk while our guy Seb was in recovery there, and she came up with this idea of, and the conversation was around this idea of struggle, like why does this keep happening to me, or why are things happening to me? Like on Monday, I slipped in cat puke at the bottom of my stairs and ate the hardwood first thing in the morning in the dark. The kids weren't even awake yet. Some guy tried to run me off the road on the way to work, but I almost went in the ditch. Good thing I know how to drive a little bit. And then it was like savage workout with the kids. And I was like sitting there having a pity party to myself. And then her words kind of resonated with me. And it was like she brought to the table the idea of, this is not happening to me, this is happening for me. Like, just what a simple shift in thinking, right? And so, Nick, when you're talking about the cascade of going downhill on the scooter and blowing your shoulder out, that had this pretty, I'm just hearing it for the first time, but like a pretty legitimate and incredible impact on your outcomes as you framing it, right? Like, you didn't get to selection, but boy, oh boy, look where you are now. And I wonder, it's like, that's such an incredible way of reframing thinking. It's like, because we can get pretty, and coming back to this idea of judgment, I agree, Sean, like we all absolutely have judgment within us. But if we can look and frame things of just this structure of like, okay, this isn't happening to me, this is happening for me, all of a sudden it just reframes everything. it reframes how we're looking at what the possibilities are. And if we can do that on the daily, I think that basically has to create a more positive engagement with the world on the day-to-day living, right? Because it's really easy to get stuck in just, I mean, perseveration is a big thing for teenagers where they just get into this loop that they can't get out of. It's like, oh, they didn't look at me in the hallway because I'm wearing the new outfit, so thereby I'm less than. So now I start listening to sad bastard music on my playlist, and that just feeds my sad feeling about that initial reaction, and it just goes around and around and around. And now they're not even looking or seeing what's outside. They're just stuck in this perseverative loop, and breaking out of that is definitely an important piece of the puzzle. And I'm wondering for our listeners, like if you're waking up in the morning as an adult and you're stuck, like, could you just flip just once, ask yourself this one time, why is this not, this isn't happening to me, this is happening for me, and then see what that does to the next hour, or try to get to noon with that philosophy, and maybe that starts to change things for the better for folks.
Yeah, there's so much in there. Nick, what do you got?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, I love that. What's happening, is it for me? Like for me, I do gratitude journaling, and I write, I'm grateful I get, right? So, for example, I'm grateful I get to sleep in a bed. I'm grateful I get to go to bed knowing I'll be safe. I'm grateful I get to take a hot shower. Like it's one of those I feel very pretentious at times that I complain while I'm at school. Like, man, I don't want to do this homework. I don't want to see another damn lecture. Bah! Right? I just complain and moan about stuff. And then so I'll have to like take that perspective back, like, oh dude, I'm at the world's best college studying something I care about. Something I believe will like help me impact the world for a positive. And then so then I have to reframe it and go back to my gratitude. Like, I get to go to school. Like I get to get an education. Right. I think like the power of words, I try and start my day, or like at least at the beginning or the end, I try and bookmark or do something where I try and use these reframing words, because if not, like I think it's so easy for people to get stuck up in life and wrapped up in this wheel. And then when you just get to say something like, I get to drive to work, I get to go to work. I mean, I like the job, but I get to go to work. Because there's people out there that are like, a large majority of the world is not getting to go to work or do something that they enjoy. Like you get to be in a car, you get to eat food, you get to drink clean water. And I think these small appreciations can really help a lot of people who are stuck up in these loops. And especially for teenagers. Like I remember, I'm guessing like a lot of teenagers, I went through my boohoo phase, right? Like before I was like skinny and kind of lame in high school, I was kind of chubby. So I just kind of got these like two weird extremes. But if I had the wherewithal back then, I think it would help to say like, oh, I get to go to school. Like I still get to sleep in a bed at night. I still get to be with my family. I think that would have helped me a lot at that time and bring me out of some of these, like, I wouldn't say depressive, but these lonelier spots within like my youth. And I just think that's important. This needs to be kind of carried through stages of life.
Absolutely. I wrote down 4 words here, and it goes to everything that you guys are talking about, and I think it might at least help with some of the questions that we've been asking so far. The first one is perspective. I mean, we've just talked about perspective for the last little while, and understanding where you come from. Obviously, right? That's an important piece of it. Gratitude, same deal. Understanding that everything that you've done has led you here, and that's a good thing. One of the terminologies I used for gratitude is I asked for this. So whenever something, that little pity party goes in the back of my head of just like, oh man, why? What is, again? Seriously? Any of those things? And I go, no, I asked for this because I did. My kids are annoying. I asked for this. I wanted kids. That's part of the job. Okay. I got a cat that threw up all over in the middle of the night. I asked for this. I have a cat, right? Like every single piece of that I asked for. So that's something that I really want to touch on. Humility is the other one. Again, we hammer on this pretty often on the show, as well as with all the people we've talked to. Humility is supremely important. But the last piece on this, and to your question, Steve, earlier about dealing with kids, values. And to Sean's point, Alex Hormozy might not vibe with you because the things that you value are not attached, are not linking with what his resume states, right? Whereas somebody else, those values might align a little bit better, like the panel here. And being able to not only engage someone else's values, that enables you to engage everything else. So I want to get somebody into jiu-jitsu. Awesome. let's go do jiu-jitsu, but they have no value within their physical being, that's going to be a hard sell. If they're already physically fit and they take a great deal of value in their own physical being, that's a way in. Hey man, this is going to help your cardio, it's going to do this, that, blah blah. You can start appealing to that value, and then you can bring people into that realm. So in taking those larger concepts of what we're talking about and bringing it down to personal values, not grand values, but personal values. And that takes getting to know somebody. That takes understanding where they're coming from. It takes a perspective of their life, having gratitude there in your life, having the humility to say, I don't know everything, and then appealing to the values. I think that's the key, at least in my mind. What do you guys think, Sean?
I think that you're onto something, though there is another additional layer that I'd love people to focus on more so than their own internal voice, which is, well, I asked for this, so, this is on me, or I get to go to school. Actually, the higher level is, I asked for kids, I've got kids, and now I'm going to turn them into freaking awesome kids for the world. Or I get to go to school, but because I'm in school, I get to help the world, or I get to cure ... or I get to etc. And so there has to be the individual and there has to be the team. There has to be what's in it for you, but there has to be what's in it for the world. And so we'd been talking earlier, started off with, I was in an airport, there's a guy in big mountain boots, we open into a conversation. I decided not to go climb that mountain with that German couple. The reason I decided that is because I had other things to do. I had an entirely different country that I was going to do things in. I had international security consulting responsibilities that I had to check off. And I had some other things that needed to be done on a personal level. And so if I hadn't have made that decision of, I'm not going to do the mountain with this dude because I've got other things. If I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be married. I wouldn't have kids right now. That's called fate, I suppose. But fate wasn't a random moment. It was a conscious decision. My conscious decision was, I'm not going to do that with them because I've got other things to do with them. These people over here, not these people over here. And I think that moment that we've been talking about, the meatball is an example, the kid who is not in the game, what he doesn't understand right now is every moment that slips by is the egg timer. But every moment that's slipping by, he gets to choose what his next abnormal moment is to start building off of. There is a point in life where everyone gets faced with a decision and they get to shrug their shoulders and ignore it. That's called the fire burning out. Then there's the time where you get to look at the moment and make a decision on, I'm not going to do that with you because I've got to do that with them. As long as you've got something to do, man. That is the branching point. I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do that. That is way different than, I'm not going to do this and I've got nothing else to do. If you get a call this evening from a buddy that says, hey, bro, do you want to join me at the skate park tomorrow? And you say no, but you've got nothing else on the go. That's what I'm not keen on. That is not my jam. That is not the solution. That is not the way to live your life. But if you've got branching points all day long in front of you that are good and gooder, well, now you're living a good life. Where it goes wrong is where you've got this opportunity in front of you and you ignore this and you don't do anything else beyond that. That is living an empty life of no decisions. That is becoming a leaf in the wind where you are victim to the world as it pushes you around. In order to get out of that victimhood of life just does life, you've got to own your life. You have to make the decisions to kick ass in something. As the meatball, I'm sure that he's got some sort of ass that he can kick in the future. He just hasn't identified what ass that is. But in his branching decision on Monday, Steve, when he gets to decide, am I going to go left or right? He cannot be allowed to remain in the center and not make a decision on which ass is going to be kicked.
I really love that because not choosing something is a choice. And in that choice, you're choosing death. It's a little death every single time. I think that's fantastic. Nick, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, like the not choosing thing. I remember as a young team leader, when I was on an assault team, we were always taught go left when you go through the breach, go left or go right. Like either way, make a choice because doing nothing will get you killed. So, the right decision or the wrong decision is better than no decision because no decision is guaranteed death. But to the personal value thing, man, I think it's you can't. We were talking about awesomeness or death or like all these other big things, but to the personal value, like if you haven't taken the time to define who you are, what your own personal values are, your pillars of your own man kind of thing, well then those things just get filled in by someone else, by an external source, and then you don't even know what to do when you do get these opportunities. If you have the good and the gooder, well, if you don't understand your own personal values, then neither of these are. You may never actually take up on any of those. I think it's an important thing, and we've been kind of harping this whole time, but I think the idea of spending time kind of alone or not like graded, but a little bit in your day or something, and necking down who you are as a person and where your personal values lay and why you want to do the things that you want to do and just get to know yourself. That'll allow these decisions that come up later on in life to be a lot easier. And you have a foundation to stand upon. You can look back at these things that you've written down and be like, I'm not doing this because that's not who I am. And I know that because I have to find that here. And then that will allow you to kind of navigate the waters as these branches come up later on in life.
Absolutely. Steve, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean you're summarizing everything nicely. It's just I think the other thing too is just saying no, like knowing when to exercise your personal values, right? I've been I've been saying a lot more in the last 3 weeks. That's a you problem, right? Like I'm not going to take on other people's dysfunction, or I'm not going to take on other people's judgments or perspectives, because I feel like I have a fairly developed sense of who I am and quite a well developed sense of my values and what I believe in personally. And if people don't align with that, and even worse, if they try to project it onto me, I'm not taking any ownership of their stuff. It's too hard on me mentally and emotionally to try and own other people's things. I'll steer, I'll guide, I'll encourage, I'll be empathetic, I'll be compassionate. And you guys know from previous talks, like I very much feel empathy is a feeling, compassion is action. So if I'm pushing somebody if I'm pushing somebody to better themselves, that is how I'm showing them compassion. And if that's uncomfortable to them, so be it, right? It's like I spoke on the last one. It was like, I'm not intimidating, you're intimidated. And just because I live into my values, or I try to every day, I'm not batting a thousand, but it's like I try my best. And yeah, I feel like healthy boundaries are very much a part of that, and being willing to share with somebody like, no, that's not on me, that's a you thing, because I'm squared away over here, and I'll help you get squared away too. But I'm sorry if it's uncomfortable, but that's where I have to draw that line. And I think that's been very useful for me in the last little bit. And so I hope folks out there that are listening have a sense of their own values, but B, a sense of like where their values stop in terms of trying to wear anybody else's things.
Yeah. Sean?
So, Nick, you talked about spending time with yourself and kind of hanging out, getting on your meditation, your namaste, and all of that good stuff. That's awesome. I think everyone should. Honestly, I'm having a bit of fun with it, but everyone should self-reflect. Everyone should contemplate. Everyone should take a little bit of time each day just to hang out with themselves. But if you do that too long, you'll start to create your own little echo chamber. You'll start to believe your own nonsense as if it's factual. And none of it is factual. The only facts we've got in front of us are the ones that are tested through science or not opinion. And so our opinions on how well we're doing are just that, our own opinion. And the best way to pressure test our opinion is to sit down with ourselves and figure out what our opinion is, and then hang out with other people who you either respect or have got a good way of looking at the world around them, maybe some experiences that give them better clarity than the normies. Like this podcast, as an example, I threw out Hormozy's name. And I don't know why it gets under my skin a little bit. I think, as you know, Nick, you'd stated he's got a lot of positive attributes. I think it's a hint of smugness about him. Now, maybe that's just my eye, my critical eye. Maybe it's just a vibe I pick up off him. Just a hint of smugness. And somehow that just bugs me. He could, like, if we sat down and talked, he might become my best friend. Who knows? I've got an open enough mind that when I hang out with someone, I can flip the script super quick. Like, what is it about this dude that kind of irritates? Oh, he's a good dude. Right on. Now we're going to get along. And so I don't step in and with a little bit of prejudge and that's it. It's carved in stone and we're never going to get to hang out. And I'm not going to think you're cool ever because I've already made my decision in a split second. It's not how I work. And this podcast is an example of that. By you throwing out your opinion on Hormozy, since then I've been formulating, it's probably the hint of smugness. I should get over that. What a goof I am. I'm going to open my mind up a little bit more to him, the open mindset. But the only way that I can make a shift like that is if the opinion that I listen to, Nick, is an opinion that I respect based on their resume. So Hormozy couldn't sit down and say, you should listen to Nick. He's got a few good things to say. Screw Hormozy. But when Nick says, hey, give Hormozy a go again, I'm going to give that the nod. Isn't that funny how a person's resume or how they've lived their life or their experiences or how we will calibrate with a vibe will help us form our other vibes or be more open to other vibes? So Nick, there you go, living proof that a growth mindset can create goodness in the world for me by aligning just a little bit more with Hormozy and benefiting from it.
Interesting. This goes quite interesting. I like this point because you've said it before. I don't know if we've ever said it on the air, but we've said it in between, in the green rooms and stuff like that, is that you actively follow people that you don't like. You actively, and I do the same thing now too, is that there's a lot of people on my feed that I don't agree with in any way at all. Yet I still see their stuff come up, and it's a little litmus test of, like, what's the other side of what it is that I believe versus what they believe. And to your point, there's been some people that I've listened to or I've seen a clip and been like, okay, that and it just kind of brings the slider over just a little bit. Now I'm a little bit more okay with their opinion, or I'm a little bit more okay with what they're saying. Most of their stuff, no. But maybe this little point. Okay, I got it. But it's that openness, right? It's that ability to seek more, even in something that you don't agree with or don't like or don't have experience with. I think that's an interesting point on it too. Nick, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the idea of being open-minded and the growth mindset, Sean, is just, I mean, that's what I'm striving towards all the time. When I got into this school, I got a text from my friend that said, good luck in enemy territory. And I thought that was wild. I mean, like, I get it, right? Like, coming from the communities that we come from and all that other jazz and the community that I'm in now. But with that being said, like, I have friends here that I never would have interacted with in 1,000 years in any other life. But the fact that we're peers now gave me the opportunity to kind of, like you said, look at the resume, like, all right, hey man, this kid's here doing something right? They're at Harvard studying neuroscience, they're on a pre-med track, whatever. Like, give them a chance to see what they got to say. And while I may not agree with everything they say or what they value or their standpoints are, there are things about them there's positive attributes. And I think that's, a positive. There's a reason why I love talking to you guys and being here and just seeing what you guys put out there, because it's awesome to see other people who are pursuing that idea of just like, hey, not like being the best version of yourself doesn't just mean like being the most fit and optimized health and all those other things. It means open-mindedness and be able to accept others for what they are and be able to also be able to split the nuance of saying like, hey, like, I don't agree with everything that you have to say, but there are things about you that I do like, and I'm going to highlight those things. And I can push the other stuff out and connect on that. And like through that, I've gained amazing friends and I've gained perspectives. A lot of the things I do here is I'll just talk with people I know I generally won't have the same political views with. And I want to just see like if they can change my mind. And a lot of them have. And I've opened up my mind on a lot of things I thought I was pretty closed-minded about or pretty set my ways about. They have better logic, right? Their points made more sense to me. And I was like, oh, I don't know. That's fair. I never thought about it that way. And I think it's incredibly important to do. And hanging out with you guys, having these conversations helped me foster that in myself. And I think it's incredibly important.
Love it. Steve, thoughts on this?
Yeah, for sure. It's just the idea of like homeostasis, right? We will seek balance where we can find it because there's safety in that and there's comfort in that homeostasis. Where it's like I constantly try to seek out hormesis, right? Like I'm trying to force adaptation, and you have to put things under stress for things to adapt. And whether it's muscular, whether it's spiritual, whether it's mental, emotional, whether it's like personal values, like you have to kind of, and Sean's, if I'm inferring correctly, like you got to get on the fringes, and that very much can be fringes of things that you don't agree with, because what it does is it forces you to get a little bit uncomfortable with something, and because maybe there's something there that can actually help you create that hormetic response within yourself. Like I'm going to adapt my thinking. And sometimes looking at contrarian things is like it helps me understand somebody versus the thing that I find contrarian. Like if there's a political viewpoint, say that I just singularly disagree with, I can definitely entertain the ideology or whatever the question is if it helps me understand the person on the other side who's holding it. It's like it's an access point to a person to it, and it humanizes things a little bit more to help me make a human connection with somebody. Because I say it to a lot of folks all the time, mostly kids. It's like we can disagree and still be cool. Like there's I don't have to see how you see, but I can value you as a person, and I can understand your passion, and I can understand your zeal for things. um and so yeah, I think that all of these things force that hormesis, and I get pretty jacked up about it because stronger mind, stronger body, stronger spirit. It's all, if we can put our heads down on the pillow at the end of the day and say that we've done as good a job as we can on that day to force some sort of adaptation, hopefully for the positive. And if it's negative, how are we going to adapt and overcome? Like those are little wins for me for sure.
Absolutely. Sean, you got any additional thoughts on this?
Hormesis with hormosy.
I like it. I think this is a great place to kind of shut her down for the afternoon. This has been a fantastic conversation. So I just really want to say, Nick, Steve, Sean, thank you guys for the conversation because this has been absolutely fantastic. I was going to tell this story a little bit ago, but I think it's poignant right now is the fact that when I first started training to be an engineer, and I get all excited, explosives, yeah, we're gonna go blow some things up. This is gonna be awesome. What did they start with? A det, a single, one little det, pow. It's like a little firecracker, yay! And then you work up to the next one, and then you work up to the next one, you work up to the next one, and then you're, setting up massive charges that are 1 point some tons of ordnance that you're gonna light off. And sweet, that's a wicked charge. But every one of those levels is awesomeness. And every time I chose to continue that, I chose awesomeness rather than death. Right. And I think that death of the soul, death of the mind, death of the body, whatever it is that choice is, got to choose awesomeness. So let's get some final thoughts on anything that we've gone over so far today. Nick, I'm going to start with you. Final thoughts?
Gratitude is key. Be grateful and perspective on that.
Bam. Steve, final thoughts?
Just remember that everybody has the ability to offer something to somebody, and if it helps them adapt and overcome, then don't be afraid to put your hands in the mix and help give somebody what they might need on that day.
Bam. Sean, final thoughts?
Every moment is an opportunity. Choose to be more rather than less.
Bam. I like it. And again, I won't add anything too deep on this one other than continue to learn, continue to grow. Correction, continue to learn, continue to build, continue to grow. Thanks all. We'll see y'all next week.
Chimo.
Hey Collective, Big Bird here. Thanks so much for watching the episode. Really appreciate the support. It has been fantastic recording these and having these conversations. I can't thank you enough. If you'd like to watch any other ones, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to listen to another awesome convo, I got one right here. Your choice. Chimo.